Hey, everybody. Today we review Dune, the movies, part one and two, based on the novel Dune by Frank Herbert. Hey, everybody. It's your girl, Pajama, with Pajama Life. And I have a special edition of our book reviews because the Pajama Life crew, all of us have reviewed the book and the movie. So we're coming to you and talking about one of our favorite books, Dune, and the new movies, Dune Part 1 and 2. Hey, if you like adaptations, well, why haven't you subscribed to my channel? All right. First, let's talk about Dune by Frank Herbert, which is a science fiction fantasy novel published in 1965. The story focuses on Paul Atreides and House Atreides versus House Harkonnen, vying for control over the intergalactic throne. The Harkonnens want control of the spice trade, and Paul and the indigenous people of Arrakis, the Fremen, want to free the planet and change the ecosystem from a desert to a paradise. Paul must come to terms with his destiny and the impact that it has. Okay, so what did you fellas think of the book? Patrick?
Well, the book has been one of my favorites. I first read it in junior high, and I'm pretty old, so it's been around for a while. And I read it several times since then. It's one of those ones you can go back to and enjoy over and over again. Frank Herbert's world building is spectacular at that time, especially as science fiction, and it has fantasy elements in it too that really have withstood the test of time. Like I said, I've been reading it since the '70s, and it has not gotten old. I just recently reread it again just because it's such a good book. It's one of those ones you can go back to, like Lord of the Rings. You can just keep rereading it. The book, spectacular. I highly recommend it. If you haven't read it, you should be reading it.
And David, how did you come about reading the book and what do you think of the book?
Well, I think it's one of the most important pieces of science fiction, and I'll even go so far as to say American 20th century literature, bar none. Frank Herbert's work, frankly, is that profound in terms of its impact because it has so many layers to the story, and a story that sometimes life imitates art and art imitates life. I think we're starting to see some things here in this story that certainly
Yeah.
have been it's very important from the 21st century perspective from 9/11. And as we talk more about artificial intelligence, even going into a future that we don't quite know what it's going to look like just yet. Uh, like others, I heard about the movies. I saw the movies before I read the book. Loved the book. I even took a class with folks as we read through it. So kind of a structured book club, as it were, for this. Um, Again, it's a brilliant piece of science fiction that has inspired, or others might have plagiarized a little bit in genres. That's another part of a conversation to have.
Now, I think how timely this book is after 60 years. I mean, the warnings about the dangers of tampering with ecology are still as important. And now, more so, given what our planet is facing with climate change. And the political intrigue still shines in this book. It's interesting reading the book at my age. Now, this is the first time I've read the book. I didn't read it as a teenager or a young person. So I understood the choices made. And but also with Paul and his trajectory, which is really interesting to see. But it also highlights the dangers of in mixing religion and politics, and so you see this kind of merging of what happens when you are trying to be a leader and then you mix in religion with that. But for me as a minority person, it's another story is about imperialism and supremacy and how it's impacted indigenous people, and how it's increased climate destruction because of the class issues involved in it. And rather than being a time capsule story, Dune, it's kind of like Patrick said, it's kind of now starting to predict the real world. Um, and if we're not careful, Earth is going to look like Arrakis and is headed for ecological uh, nightmare because we don't have, or there's not enough responsible people in charge of making policies about climate in Mother Earth. So it's really, reading it now as an adult for the first time really was interesting to see kind of the story and the parallels. I might not have appreciated that as a kid. So I'm glad I got to read it the first time as an adult. Now, uh, so would you all recommend this book to people to read?
Well,
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. Oh my God, yeah. I mean, a friend of mine who had just recently decided to watch the movies, who had never read the books, was confused sometimes by the movie because he had not read the book. And after he's reading the book, he's like, "Oh my God, so much stuff was in here that I wish I'd known watching the movie." Read the books. Always read the book of any movie that comes out because the book has so much more nuanced details you can't get in a movie because the movie's got a 2 to 3 hour time span to compress, depending on what the book is. They were from 400 to 600 pages of information, and you can't do thoughts like the main character's thinking about this, or main character's thinking about that. Always read the book, and this book is so layered that there's no way they could have got even in two movies and or a third one if they go to that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And David, do you recommend the book?
Oh, very much so. I think it's an important book to read. You can get a lot out of it at different levels, and again, if you read it a couple of times, you'll see different things. But I think it's a very important book at just a superficial level. Reading this book, and then if you're a science fiction fan, think about you'll probably see a lot of different
Yeah.
movies and shows and maybe even other books that you've read or seen that have been inspired by this. Start Do just a cross comparison of this and Star Wars and see how many little things you might be able to see between those two works. And
Hmm.
again, 1965 the book was published versus the 1970s when Star Wars was being developed and then the film came out in 77. So there's a lot of inspiration that George Lucas got from this genre, from this book, among others. And this was a book, interestingly enough, inspired in part by the incredible movie Lawrence of Arabia, starring Peter O'Toole, and
Which is
the
also a novel.
it's also a
Maybe we should
novel
read that.
and a real life thing, though.
12
This was
Pillars
a
of
real
Islam,
story.
or 12
Yeah.
Pillars or something like that.
Yeah. So lots to draw upon. Definitely. You know what? And we're gonna do our movie review right now. But I actually was glad I watched the movies and then read the book because I was a little bit um uh it's a lot. The book is a lot. So David, hold up the book for people to see. People have short attention spans these days, but definitely take your time and read it. But it's a good read. All right,
And it's
now
over 600 pages and includes its own glossary of key terms and a
yes,
map of
it
Arrakis.
has appendices, probably 5 or 6 appendices, maps. I mean, everything to kind of describe the world.
That
So
is what you call good world building, is what that is.
yeah,
Yep.
definitely. So let's take a look now at Dune Part 1 and 2, directed by Denis Villeneuve. Villeneuve. who did Arrival, and he wrote the movies along with Jon Spaihts, and he did Doctor Strange. So the movie pretty much follows the books. um Still House Atreides versus the Harkonnens, and trying to win the spice trade and ultimately win the throne to sit on the throne and rule the galaxy. And like the book, Paul is faced with some tough choices and begins to understand that his gifts come at a very high price. So let me talk about the differences between the novel and the movie, just some of them, and then we'll get into kind of what we thought and the comparisons between the movies and the books. Some of the differences I found was that Chani in the movies were given more of a modern warrior take in the movie than in the books. She made a different choice in the end, and they used the term in the movie fundamentalist to talk about the Fremen, and that's not really used in the books. And time is really condensed in the movies, so that 1 year in the first movie, then it's crunched, and it takes place over several years in the book. The movie also does not introduce Paul has a son, Leto the second, and Paul is also has another woman, Hera, in the book with two adopted children. So those relationships are not covered in the movies. And one big change, is that Alia in the movie is never born. And in the book, she plays a pivotal role in destroying the Harkonnen family. Um, and Paul learns of his lineage in the books much earlier than the movies. And that is a big part that is only brought out in the second movie. I think Thufir Hawat dies in the movie, but in the book, he is the mentat to the Baron. And
He dies in the movies too,
He
in the
does
book too.
in the book too.
Towards
yeah,
the
yeah, I was
yeah.
just about to say he dies in the arms of Paul versus um did they really address how he died in
No,
the
they
They
movie?
didn't.
didn't.
They
They
really
just
didn't. And
kind of
Liet
ghosted
Kynes,
him.
now this
Yeah.
is another big change. Liet Kynes in the book is Chani's father and is leader of all the Fremen. In the movie, Liet Kynes is a woman, and it's not clear if she is the great aunt of Chani who gives her the Chris knife, or they just did something weird with that character who was really pivotal in the book. And I thought one of the interesting parts of the book was that the Baron really played everybody against Jessica, and so that she was the one who was the Baron told lies to make them believe that Jessica was responsible for the Duke's death. But in the movies that didn't happen. But I thought that was something really interesting about the motivations of Thufir and of Gurney. um and Paul takes in the book, he takes the water of life and is in a coma like for weeks. And in the movie, he just kind of converts the water of life and mingled with Chinese tears, which I thought was a really interesting way that they did that. And at the end of the book, Chani accepts the marriage to Ireland. But in the movie, she's like, "This some BS," and I'm out. She bounces, which would have been my reaction too. But it's played much more, um, much softer in the book than they portrayed it in the movie. And I thought Chani's character was kind of the voice of calling out her oppressors, and it wasn't that much portrayed about that in the novels. So that's kind of some of the differences. Fellas, do you think of any other differences between the book and the movies?
Well, quite a few. Those are some of the key ones. I thought, some critical. Do we critical missing scenes or just some of
Yeah.
the differences? With critical missing scenes, and what was not included in the first movie that I think really should have been. There's an important dinner just before the
Yes.
Harkonnens take
Yes.
over.
The dinner
It,
with the
The
Landsrod.
water.
the water
Yeah.
barons and those folks, and it really again just showed the contrasted the Atreides family, in particular the Duke, versus the others, and
Yeah.
how this was a man of honor and nobility.
Yeah.
And I think that that was such a critical scene, and they took it out. They did a
Yes.
nice job in the movie where Stilgard is meeting the Duke and all, but that dining room thing, which just, again, it showed while there was in a very feudal world. This is space and sci-fi, but as they use daggers and whatnot, this really could have been the Middle Ages in
Yeah.
Europe in many respects
Yeah.
with the story. So that was an important scene that I thought was missing. I thought, interestingly enough, certainly the again Lawrence of Arabia impacted the film, inspired the book. Certainly, Islamic fundamentalism, what we saw with the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. I mean, it really, I felt, and with the Thopters, I felt like it was 1981 in
Mhm.
the Punjab there, more so than on Arrakis and Dune. It really had that feel of the Mujahideen and the terrifying, understanding that we created and helped fund something that would become very destructive across the world. So there's a ominous power there. Hart, the Baron himself, interesting in stylistic choices of how he looked, not really discussed or referenced, and Herbert actually has gotten some criticism about it, was the Baron's homosexuality. I mean, he was
Yes.
a vile,
Yes. That
decadent,
was a
evil
big
man.
part of the book.
The movie, he's a big fat guy. He clearly is power hungry and ravenous.
And
But
Stellan
his
Skarsgård is so perfect because it's not like the 80s version where he's kind of a just slovenly buffoon almost, but
yeah,
this is a thinking and plotting and conniving and vicious, but in a sly way, kind
he
of
got the mental
Baron.
part down so well. What a great
Yes.
actor in the prosthetics. But I think that those were a couple of
Yeah.
key pieces. Um, and again, the time frame. They shortened the time frame here. It was a few
Yeah.
years, and I think the book allowed. And I think realistically, the the Muad'Dib, his legend, but also his accomplishments in stopping the spice production, putting it to a halt, and making the world powers, the intergalactic powers, come to Arrakis. I don't think that that was different there. It was truncated in a way. So
Yeah. Yeah. Pat, you have anything to add on that? No.
Well, there's a couple things that the movie I was fearing that they were not able to do very well, but just because of the particular way it was done, the whole idea of the Kwisatz Haderach, the the a male Benny Gesserit who could access all these memories and all the stuff he had to go through and all the knowledge he drew from to make all these decisions. They really didn't even they brushed on it barely with the changing of the water of life. He was the only man who's. I mean, this is what the Benny Gesserit in the book they talk about how they've been for centuries in breeding programs in order to get this result, and it came a generation early. They thought it would be the next generation, and they didn't really touch on that to be honest. They're and then
Yeah.
obviously another, and I know this seems nitpicky, but through the whole books, they talk so much about water discipline, about how you don't go out in the open sand without your hood on and covering up. The only thing you see is your eyes. You have a mask on, in addition to the
And
nose
having your
plugs and all
seal
this stuff.
suit on all the
Always had
time.
to be sealed, and they had to have, and they had airlocks to get in and out of
Yeah.
their seats and stuff. They just, hey, I understand it's probably a aesthetic choice because you want to see Zendaya's face, you want to see, Timothy Chalamet's flowing locks and stuff, but and it wouldn't look good in a nice still suit, with just your eyes showing, your blue eyes, and which
Yeah.
at the same time could have been a
Which weren't
really
even that
menacing look.
blue in the movies. They weren't that blue that
Yeah,
I
Yeah.
the
envisioned. I
spice
envisioned them
diet,
like
yes.
a turquoise color, This
Hmm.
was very
Yeah, but
faint.
they that just really kind of, and like I said, I knew they were going to have trouble with just transitioning from the mystical portions of it, because I mean the book itself, yes, it's based on a desert planet. There's all these political intrigues. There's these people behind people, feints within feints, and stuff like that. That even a line I think from the book,
Yeah.
about how you're always looking for things and how they're always planning. Everybody's playing chess on grandmaster levels here. But and that was fine, and they did, but there was none of the religious. They didn't really delve into the way that the Bene Gesserit had implanted people generations and generations ago in order to prepare a place, and there was definitely some religious overtones that they really get into, and it's
Yeah.
interesting to talk about when this book was written. I mean, I
Yeah.
read this, like I said, in junior high, and I learned about words like jihad and mujahideen and stuff like this, and all these kind of words that I wouldn't hear again until September 11th, and or during the Iran hostage crisis, and you start hearing about these things, and you're like,
Mhm.
huh, I knew
Yeah.
that word because I'd read Frank Herbert, and so I mean,
Yeah.
totally, you should. Again, I can't recommend this book enough. It's a glorious book, and it has other, like we kind of talked about, some of the warnings against religion getting in the same cart with politics and
Mhm.
artificial intelligence, even talking there, because we've talked about Thufir a couple times. A couple of you guys, both of you have said something about Thufir Hawat, who is a mentat,
Right.
which is basically a human computer, because they don't
Yeah.
have computers, because they decided that machines shouldn't think, and there was actually a
Right.
big war about it, and that they allude to throughout the entire first book. There's other books where they've actually went back into that, but there's a war against AI, and so they decided to train people to think like computers, but they were
Mhm.
still people. So I mean, there's some really, and Thufir is a really interesting character throughout the entire book, but you don't really
Yeah.
see him much. And and Doctor Yui
Yeah.
was kind of just glossed over. Really interesting character there that they let go.
Yeah.
I
And I
understand
think
there's
with
time constraint.
Hoover too is that Paul was trained in the Bene Gesserit way,
Yep.
and he was trained as a mentat.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
he was the perfect combination of being able to understand the religious end of it, but also being very calculating and cold and logical to be able to think several moves ahead. And then with the spice increasing that power, that's the real power of being able to use, multiple parts of your brain you can access with the spice.
And
Only
This
through
Pam,
the
was
Kozak pottery.
also around the time of LSD and hallucinogenics and drugs coming out. So some of that is in there as well.
and
So
what
I
was
thought,
really stuck out to me in this story, and the movie alluded to it a little bit. It's certainly the dangers of religion and the secular power of religion is spoken here. But what Frank Herbert has spoke often about before his passing, and what was a hard thing to grasp within the book, is beware the hero, beware the one man who can lead, because in the power of that one man, this cult of personality
Yep.
can create danger and bad. So the
yeah,
beginning, and I don't think the movies even did a good job of bringing this out. You
yeah,
start off as the hero, but certainly by the time he drinks the waters of life, his personality is very changed, very different. He doesn't see people as his father did. He sees their utility.
right.
and the ability
And that's
to
that
use
Bene
and destroy them.
Gesserit and his other lineage. I won't give it away, but his other lineage that comes into play, I think, on that.
It's
And
interesting to see how he spends so much of the book trying not to be
right.
the leader of the jihad. I mean, there is a
Right.
large. I mean, that is his biggest
Yeah.
fear throughout all the book. It's not about
Yeah.
losing to the Harkonnens. It's not about dying. It's about becoming this standard that people are going to cut a bloody swath through the universe under his name. That's his biggest fear, and so
Yeah.
that should be something everybody should take away from this book.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And you know how power can corrupt. Absolutely. Even the best intentions can fall by the wayside because of the political and ethical morass you'll go through. So now what did the movies in your opinion get right? For me, they were absolutely beautiful and do an amazing job of bringing the books to life. You know, it's so complicated, the literature, and the what he does on the screen is just amazing. I think that his visuals are incomparable. I mean, I didn't know his work. He did Arrival. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. You know, and you see some of those elements, but with this, baby, he took it to the highest level. And I really liked his thoughtful take on it and making it accessible because, you know, there's been other movies and TV shows that really haven't been accessible and made it maybe in some ways kind of cartoonish or kind of weird. Um, but I really liked what he did and the decisions that were made to what they showed on the screen. David, how about you? What did you
but
like? What do you think the movies got right?
from the visual standpoint, I thought that was fantastic. You know, the ocean, you know, the sands were like the seas. You know, the way that was done. So I thought it was beautifully done. I thought the costuming was really great for the
Oh,
most part.
yes.
Um, you know, I really
Jessica's
liked
and
that. Jessica's
Emerald's Bene
outfit,
Gesserit. Oh,
yeah, I thought they were really sharp in the costuming there. Not as much of a comparing, say, the David Lynch movie that where people were dressed like band guys, band uniforms a little bit Napoleonic style, which was fine. But I thought the costuming was good, the look was good. So those are definitely things that the film got right. I thought the acting was on point. Um, and I certainly think Dune Part One did a great job of the start of the story, and I think that was actually the strongest part of the story. I think it Herbert was kind of literally wandering in the desert a little bit, figuring out how to bring this home. Um, and I think the first part of the book and the movies is the strongest factor.
Pat, how about you? What did the movies get right?
Well, I think the visuals were on point. I mean, like the ornithopters and the way they made them sound like bugs, and because that's the way
Mm-hmm.
I pictured it after reading the books. Like I said, I had some issues with some of the still suit discipline stuff, you know, because that was so integral to everything they did in the book,
Yeah,
and they just seemed to kind of let that go to the wayside. And I know it's nitpicky, but I mean, it was the central fact of life on Arrakis was you
Yeah.
kept your water, you know, and it just seemed a
Right.
little bit kind of cavalier about the whole attitude about that. Um, it's and again, there's just no way they could have done the religious aspects at you know justice based on the way the books were written about how Mahdi went into the trance and accessed all this stuff and how they had to kind of hide it from his Fedican warriors and stuff and but and again they didn't really delve into him trying so hard to get away from the the religious mantle. The movies looked good. The casting was solid, except for Austin Butler. I did not like that choice. I did enjoy the way
I
that they.
didn't mind.
Well, I
I
know you
didn't
don't, but
mind him.
I didn't think he fit. He wasn't flashy enough for what I after reading Fade Roth, I thought putting Dave Bautista's Raven perfect. I just
Yeah, I when I read the books and then I saw the movie, I didn't think he was a bad choice because I thought Fade was more sly than the Dune of the 80s where Sting was very kind of, just a straight up psychopath. And this guy was more like sly and a sociopath, just super cold, and was, not um over the top like I think he was in the other movie. So I thought that was kind of cool.
I mean, it wasn't a bad choice. I mean, he was not he it just didn't get something right that I felt was
Yeah.
important, and also something that
At
he
least
didn't
he
really.
didn't do the Elvis voice.
No, he didn't do that with voice, but I would. Oh my God, stop it! I just had pictures in my mind of Fade Roth saying "a whole lot of loving" or something. Would have been really weird.
It's bald Elvis. We've had fat Elvis, and now we have bald, black and white Elvis.
Well,
Yeah,
so this was I mean, another thing, that they didn't really delve into the Benny Gesserit stuff, and that was very pivotal and central to the way
Mhm.
the book moved, because they were really the movers and the shakers throughout this whole thing.
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, what we talked some about, but anything like one thing you felt like the book just bit it on that it just didn't get right at all.
The book,
I'm sorry, the movie. The
The movie.
movie.
Well, I actually didn't like the decision to make the Harkonnens in that black and white.
Oh my
Um,
god, that was
I,
my favorite part.
I didn't
Come on,
like that.
man.
No, I didn't like it at all.
Oh,
I
come
didn't.
on.
I didn't. I also think from the movie's perspective, the first book did a great. The first movie did a great job of talking about how powerful and strong the Sardaukars were,
Yeah,
and I don't think we really saw them how good they're supposed to be, and then be bested really by the Fremen. That was overwhelmed by the worms there in that scene, but I think that was one of the the subtle things that was very powerful in the book was how the emperor saw he had the Sardaukar. They were raised in this really harsh world, made them great soldiers.
yeah,
Well, you know, from the emperor's old planet to Arrakis, it's like hold my beer. You think that place is rough? Let me show you what a real hardened warrior looks like with that water discipline. That was such a huge thing. Just the
yeah,
whole concept there, the book. You had people speaking different languages using the same vocabulary
yeah,
in the book that was missing. Um, but I don't think they did that. I don't think they've got those pieces. They didn't do that part to it justice. Jessica Ferguson was also, for better or for worse, portrayed more as a Machiavellian leader, more maybe more of a bad person in the movie than I think, as I recall,
Oh,
she was in the
I
book.
like that.
I didn't say I
I
didn't
like
like it, but it was
that.
very. But to me, I don't know that it stayed true to Herbert's initial vision for her. I could be mistaken. It's been a while since I've read the book,
Yeah,
but that I saw as maybe something otherwise because I thought she was a really again like Paul. She was the co-hero, the co-star
yeah,
in the first part of the film.
yeah. And I thought that it the ending just kind of, I was like, what? That's it? I mean, it just kind of stopped. Same thing in the book. I didn't like the book, the way the book ends. I was like, what? No. And so in the movie, it kind of ends in a way that I'm like, oh, come on. Although they did kind of redeem it with Chani's, what she did. I kind of was like, I know that's right. But I didn't like that. And unlike David, I thought the black and white was just perfect to tell the stark world of the Harkonnen and how like it was either live or die. That was it. That you ain't get no kind of in between. So I thought that was good. Pat, what did you think that just bit it in the movies.
Well, kind of like what Dave talked about, the Sardaukar, being were just kind of a footnote, but in the book they were such great warriors that no one wanted to go up against the Sardaukar. In fact, that was one of the big motivators politically to that the emperor had control of the Sardaukar. And there's even a little bit of a conversation between Thufir Hawat when he was the mentat for the Baron about somebody mentioned something about the prison planet that the emperor had, which is where they trained the Sardaukar, and he's like, that was, oh no, don't talk about that because that's how we're gonna turn the Fremen into our Sardaukar and stuff. Kind of basically, there's the tough environments breed tough people, and the worst environments breed the toughest people, and fighters and stuff. Especially when they're brought up as resistance fighters through all this, all they learn to do is fight from world. The minute they get going, that was kind of you didn't get much of that, but it was if you read the books, you saw it, and you could see how they were kind of they were definitely making nods to it throughout the movie. So
Mm-hmm.
there was a few things that there was hard. It was hard for them to talk about the Bene Gesserit, how they were really the people who were pulling the strings through everything, including the Emperor himself, because he was married to a Bene Gesserit, had Bene Gesserit daughters, and they were doing what the Bene Gesserit said rather than what the Emperor was saying. So I mean, there
Yep.
was a lot of subtext there about the empowerment of women and how they were all running everything, really, and no one wanted to talk about it.
Yeah. So, what in the end, what would you rank the book and the movie? 1 out of 10. The book, David.
Oh, I think the book I'd put as a 9 out of 10.
Nine
Nine
out
out
of ten. Okay.
9 out of 10.
Okay,
The
Pat.
book.
How
Yeah.
about you?
Oh, it's a 10 for me. I mean, like I said, I've read this a dozen times. I mean, this is one of those ones I can go back to multiple times, just like Lord of the Rings, just like the Silmarillion. I mean, this is definitely a well used book in my library.
Yep.
I would give it probably an 8. And just because it's so dense and so complicated, so it kind of, you have to read it multiple times, I think, to really enjoy it. The movies, 1 out of 10 for me. I think 9 out of 10 for both movies combined
Mm.
is probably a 9 out of 10. How about you, David?
Uh, I would rank the first one as probably a 9. I'd probably have the second one for some of the issues that I'd raised. Actually, I'll take that back because I didn't like the way what they did to Kynes in the first one. I'll go both as an 8.
8. Oh, okay. David, but Patrick.
I'm agreeing. It's about an 8. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot of things it got right, but other things it did not get right that I had problems with. So, I mean, but it was overall good, overall enjoyable, but it was not what I was looking for 100%. So, 8.
So I'm gonna say that's an 8.5.
It'd be 8.33 actually, but whatever.
Okay, 8.33.
Our Mentat over here. All right. With the math.
Well, I think if you really like this review, like and subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell so you can become aware of all of our content. Guys, thank you so much. We'll have to do this again, a combo review where we've all read the book and seen the movie and get together and talk about it. Because I think that yields such a rich treasure trove of knowledge and us doing something together. So, hey, say goodnight to the people, Patrick.
Good night, everybody. Read books and watch movies.
David, say goodbye to the people.
So long, everybody. Hope you enjoy yourself. Get a book, get a movie. Just have some fun this springtime. So long.
And for me, Pajama, hey, get out there to your local public library and support it and read a book and watch good movies in the theaters. We'll see you next time. Take care.